In 1979, a man in Kano had 2 private jets, 2 Rolls-Royce, and 6 other different cars.
Sorry, you come some soft drink.
This man's name is Alhaji Nafiu Rabiu. He was one of the richest men in Kano in the 1970s. Alhaji Nafiu's wealth was not just about his Rolls-Royce or the way people admired his cars. This was at a time in Nigeria when Peugeot and Volkswagen had assembling plants in some parts of the country, especially in Kaduna and Lagos, where they produced brand new cars that sold between 1,000 naira and 4,000 naira, depending on the model. At a time when 1 naira was still in a note, he built his wealth from owning multiple textile factories.
This Rolls-Royce is one of 2 that he owns. Among this man's other assets are 2 luxury jets, which cost £1 million a year simply to maintain.
Imagine spending £1 million in 1979 just to maintain 2 private jets. £1 million today is more than 1.7 billion naira. Nafiu Rabiu was so wealthy that today, wealth is part of the family name Rabiu. His father was one of the known businessmen in Kano, and his younger brother is the owner of Bua Cement and Bua Group, Abdul Samad Rabiu.
You can have all these opportunities, all these resources. If you are not able to harness them, they will be useless.
But before Alhaji Nafiu became known in the Nigerian business world, let's go back to Lagos in the year 1920, when there were no boreholes in the whole of Lagos.
Here, the first Portuguese explorers, arriving in Nigeria from overseas 500 years ago, found the banks lined with villages.
During this time, the major source of water was the rivers and lakes around Lagos. Even the European colonial masters had no source of tap water. But there was a man called Candido da Rocha who saw the opportunity and made a name for himself. There is a house in Kakawa Street in Lagos Island called the Water House. This was where Candido da Rocha lived. This house is called the Water House because after Candido da Rocha's father died around 1891, Candido da Rocha took charge of the family house. It was in this house that he dug a well. And from this well, he supplied water to most areas in Lagos. This was how the house got the name Water House. And considering the fact that it was the first house in Lagos to have a water fountain, the name Water House became a perfect name for this building. Candido da Rocha's father was a slave who was captured and sold in 1840 and was taken to Brazil, but he was originally from Ilesha. It was in Brazil that his wife Angelica gave birth to Candido until they were able to return to Nigeria a few years after Candido was born. Then, when they came back to Nigeria, as a former slave who had been exposed to the Brazilian and American culture, it was easier to get into trade and discover the best possible ways to make money. Candido made a lot of fortune from the water business. He is considered the first Nigerian to become a millionaire. His wealth and influence was so profound that many years later, he came up with some of his friends to set up a bank to lend money to business owners who needed loans. They called the bank the Lagos Native Bank. Candido would later abandon the banking business to go further into the business of lending money. He set up a company and called it the Lagos Finance Company. He is also the founder of the former Bonanza Hotel in Lagos. According to reports, Candido was so wealthy that he sent his expensive clothes to London for laundry. His granddaughter was the founder of the famous school in Victoria Island called Adrao International School. Adrao simply means Abimbola da Rocha Afodu Omololu. Before Candido da Rocha died in 1959, at a time when Nigeria was heading to independence, then a new form of business other than the water business began to emerge. Now, people are moving to major cities in search of jobs. Lagos, as the capital city, became the most preferred destination.
As more people pour in, the population of the cities is mushrooming.
Lagos, Nigeria's major port, its chief gateway to the faraway outside world.
This movement of people to major cities became a problem. Remember, back then, there were no transport companies to move people from different parts of the country to the cities. And aside the movement of people, foreign trading companies were also shipping their goods to the ports in Lagos. So, most traders in the different parts of the country also moved into Lagos to buy goods for trade. But there was a company in Lagos called John Holt, which specialized in buying palm oil, rubber, and cocoa in Nigeria, exporting them to England. And while returning to Nigeria, the company would import textiles, bicycles, and other products to sell in Nigeria. During those years, this company had some Nigerian salesmen who helped them to sell the goods. Among them was a certain sales clerk in the company called Louis Ojukwu. While working in John Holt, Louis decided to establish his own textile shop in Onitsha. He would buy some textiles from John Holt and send them to Onitsha to his textile store. He called the shop in Onitsha Ojukwu textiles. This was in the year 1930. Back then, the difficulty of moving goods to Onitsha was that there was no bridge over the river Niger, and most traders would send their goods to Asaba and transport it across the river into Onitsha using the available canoe men in Asaba. But Ojukwu was able to notice that it took some unusual number of days to move goods from Lagos to Asaba. This was a bigger challenge to the traders than the absence of bridge across the river. Due to high demand and few available trucks, these traders spent so many days taking their goods down to Onitsha and the other parts of eastern Nigeria. This was when he decided to save some money and buy a second-hand truck to move his goods. But he was not the only trader facing the logistics issue. Other traders would approach him to make use of his truck for their goods. From one truck, Ojukwu bought another truck. Remember, he was still working in John Holt. He then decided to resign from the company. This was the beginning of the name Ojukwu Transport. In 1939, this time, he had increased the number of trucks he had and was also moving not just goods, but people and farm products. He became the major transporter along eastern and western roads in Nigeria. But suddenly, in September 1939, the Second World War broke out. During this war, the British government was moving food supplies and soldiers from Nigeria, taking them to the war front to help them fight the war. They chose Ojukwu Transport as their logistics partner to help them move the soldiers and the food supplies to the ports.
Pilot Officer Peter Thomas is the first African to be granted His Majesty's commission as a pilot in the Royal Air Force. Before the war, he was a civil servant in Lagos, the capital of Nigeria. When war broke out, he volunteered for the Royal Air Force and set his heart on being a pilot. The Nigerian regiment formed part of the Royal West African Frontier Force, of which their commander-in-chief has said never has the reputation of the Royal West African Frontier Force been higher than it is now. Nothing stops these men. Mountains, forests, and rivers are taken in their stride. They are quickly in action when the word is given. They're as keen as mustard, and they're very good shot. These African soldiers are typical of the colonial troops from every part of the empire who've done their bit in every theater of war to which they've been called. Keen, brave, loyal men who are ready for any sacrifice in the cause for which they fight.
After the war ended in 1945, due to his contribution in helping Britain during the war, the British government awarded Louis Ojukwu, AKBE, Knight of the British Empire, and he then became Sir Louis Ojukwu. By 1950, Ojukwu's transport business had expanded to include over 200 trucks, making it one of the largest fleets in the whole of West Africa. Not just his over 200 trucks, Ojukwu also made his money by importing dried fish, expanding his textile business, dealing in cement, and most importantly, his transport business. He would later become the first president of the Nigerian Stock Exchange, as well as president of the African Continental Bank. He also served on the board of directors of some of Nigeria's most profitable companies, such as Shell Nigeria, Guinness Nigeria Limited, Nigeria National Shipping Line, Nigerian Cement Factory, Nigerian Coal Corporation, Costain West Africa Limited, John Holt PLC, Nigerian Marketing Board, among others. One of the most iconic symbols of his worthy status was his Rolls-Royce Silver Wraith, which was used to drive Queen Elizabeth II during her visit to Nigeria in 1956. You could imagine what it is for the Nigerian government then to borrow a car from an individual to drive the Queen.
Lagos, capital of Nigeria, prepares to give the welcome of its life to Queen Elizabeth II. 17 hours from the mists of London Airport, the Queen's Argonaut comes to rest in the sunshine of Ikeja, the airport of Lagos. The guard of honor is mounted by the Nigeria regiment, many of whom, like the Queen's husband, wear the Burma star. Governor-General Sir James Robertson and Lady Robertson welcome the royal couple. The Queen's car draws up to the city boundary, where the leaders of Lagos are ready to greet her. The Governor-General is there to present them to Her Majesty.
By 1960, this time Nigeria had gotten her independence. Ojukwu's wealth was estimated to be about $4 billion in today's value. He is in fact the first Nigerian to become a billionaire. But unfortunately, in 1966, just at the age of 57, Sir Louis Ojukwu passed away. His son, Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu, would later become the leader of the state of Biafra.
If civil war comes, and I do think it is imminent, you're quite right, it will for us be the price of freedom. I think that when it does come, that the people on the other side would be surprised as to what they're going to get.
But before Louis Ojukwu ever thought of becoming a billionaire, there was a time in Nigeria when agricultural crops were the major exports from the country. The palm oil, the rubbers, the granules, yams, and even timber. And the men who controlled this agricultural trade in Nigeria were the big boys of those days. This was at a time when there were granite pyramids in Kano. These granite pyramids were bags of granules stacked in the shape of a pyramid. Most of them were taller than the tallest building in Nigeria then. And there was a man called Al-Hassan Dantata. Before he died in 1955, there was a day he pointed to 60 granite pyramids in Kano and said, "These are mine."
And the trading stations at Kano are usually well stocked with some of the finest skins in the country. At the railway siding are piled up hundreds of sacks of groundnuts waiting for transport to the clearing stations.
A granite pyramid then was estimated to be about 15,000 bags of granite, and Dantata had 60 of those pyramids. He was regarded as the richest man in the whole of West Africa. For you to understand it better, in 1929, when a bank called Bank of British West Africa, which is known today as First Bank, opened a branch in Kano, Dantata deposited 20 camel loads of silver coins in his account in the bank. Imagine what it means that to take your money to the bank, you had to go in a convoy of 20 heavily loaded camels. We know how strong camels can be, and we can consider how heavy the bags of money they were carrying were. His business was not just in trading granules. He also sold kola nuts, cattle, beads, precious stones, and the other commodities across the northern region. As far back as 1918, when British companies were the major businesses in Nigeria, Dantata was selling shiploads of granules to a company based in the United Kingdom called the Royal Niger Company, which is today known as UAC. He was so wealthy during his days that in the year 1949, he donated a property worth £10,200 for the construction of the first indigenous textile mill in northern Nigeria. Today, the name Dantata is still connected to wealth, and his great-grandson is the richest man in Nigeria, Alhaji Aliko Dangote.
I came from a wealthy family. My late great-grandfather in the 1940s was actually the richest West African.
Dangote's mother was named Maria Sanusi Dantata, the daughter of Alhaji Sanusi Dantata, while Sanusi Dantata was the son of Al-Hassan Dantata. So, Dangote's mother was a granddaughter of Al-Hassan Dantata. That was how Dangote became a great-grandson of Al-Hassan Dantata.
My late grandfather was one of the wealthiest Nigerian. The family name is Dantata. That's from my maternal side. My father too, was fairly rich, but he was both, in business and also in politics.
Later on, Dangote would receive some money from one of his mother's brothers to start his own business. One of those richest Nigerians, before Dangote went into business, was a man called Timothy Odutola. He was the first president of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. He started his business life in 1932 when he opened some stores in the western region of Nigeria where he sold damask and fish. After he left his job as a cut clerk, a few years later, he began trading in cocoa and palm oil. Before 1960, Odutola had established a multi-million-dollar business, including 3 factories, a retail shop, a cattle ranch, and a sawmill where he had some machines for cutting woods. But Odutola's business masterclass was shown when he began the production of tires and tubes in Ibadan. The business did so well that around 1967, he built a $1.7 million tire and tube production plant after establishing a 5,000-acre rubber plantation with the plan to improve his company's production capacity by harvesting rubber from his own rubber plantation and making it available for his tire factories. He was so interested in manufacturing that he believed that one day Nigeria would become one of the top industrialized countries of the world. According to some reports, he said the time is coming when we will produce more than we can consume and we will have to look outside Nigeria for markets. By the time Odutola was getting older, there was a certain MKO Abiola who was one of the richest Nigerians in the 1980s.
Well, you see, we've asked so many questions in one, but let me give it to you. Very briefly, because I must go to Port Harcourt now.
Abiola began his professional life when he started working for Barclays Bank in Ibadan in the year 1956. He would later leave the bank, worked as account officer in the Western Region Finance Corporation before going to Scotland to further his education in accountancy. Many years after then, when he returned to Nigeria, he got a job as a senior accountant in the University of Lagos Teaching Hospital. He would later open a business where he sold communication equipment. He called it Radio Communications Nigeria. This was at a time when telephone was becoming popular in Nigeria. He would later create other businesses like Abiola Farms, Wonder Bakeries, Concord Press, which was the company publishing the National Concord newspaper. He also owned Banuso Fisheries, Concord Airlines, Summit Oil International Limited, Africa Ocean Lines, Habib Bank.
It is important that one should be very serious with what one wants to do. Nobody can clap with one hand. To clap, you need two hands.
During his days, he was one of the biggest supporters of football in Nigeria. Apart from his two football clubs in Lagos called Concord FC and ITT Football Club, he also had another club in Abeokuta called Abiola Babes. Sometimes he traveled with the team to play their matches.
Remember, I followed the team to play their match against Mchanga Rangers. We got to Lusaka. We were told by the NFA that the match would be played in Lusaka. We struggled there on the eve of the match to be told that we'll be playing in Changa. I had to beg for a flight to hire to charter an F-27, fly us to Ndola at 10:30 at night, hired a bus from Ndola, took us to through Kitwe to Changa, only to find that the bus driver was drunk. So I drove the bus myself for 3.5 hours. We were stopped by armed robbers 3 times on the road. I had to bribe our way through into Kitwe. We got to Kitwe at 2:30 in the morning of the day of the match to find that the officials had left for Kitwe. So we had dropped the boys, made sure they rested quickly, drove the same bus back to Kitwe to look for the officials to bring them back at 7 in the morning to officiate. I was prepared to do that. You see, it's not just money.
According to this report by Business Insider Africa, in 1990, 2 years before he contested to be the president of Nigeria, MKO Abiola gave the sum of 1 million naira each to all the state universities in Nigeria, 500,000 naira each to every federal university in Nigeria, and 250,000 naira each to every polytechnic in Nigeria. You could imagine how wealthy you need to be to give out such a gift in 2026. Talk more of in 1990 when 1 naira could still buy a plate of food. Unfortunately, Abiola couldn't live to be the president of Nigeria, an opportunity he fought for, even though he was reported to have won the majority of votes in that election.
It will continue off and on until the military release the result of the June 12 election and put the democratically elected president, who is myself, in charge of affairs. I will fight for peace and we will get peace.
He later passed away after he was arrested by the government and kept in detention for many years.
They are arresting me on an allegation of felony, nameless treason or something like that. They're not doing anything, they're just taking me away. But let me go. You know, I'm delaying them.
All these men laid the foundation for some of the popular businesses in Nigeria. Most of the current billionaires were either a staff of their companies or an apprentice who learned from them. For example, it was reported that while there are many transport business owners in the southeast today, it started with Ojukwu Transport. A report by Pulse Africa suggested that the owners of Ekenedili Chukwu Transport and Isuchukwu Transport were part of the early drivers of Ojukwu Transport. And before you may forget, it was through Alhassan Dantata's wealth that the Dantata family became wealthy. And many years later, one of his grandchildren took Dangote to learn business from him after Dangote graduated from the university. And from the business, he gave Dangote some money to start his own. Today, Dangote is the richest black man in the whole world. Thank you for being there. If you listen carefully, there are some business lessons to learn from this video, and I wish you well. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Thank you.